Push that generator one more inch, Brooks, and you're fired. The alarm screamed as Ethan Brooks drove both hands into the steel frame of G17, its front wheel already crossing the red line painted across the flooded warehouse yard. 9-year-old Lily stood safely behind the loading barrier, aiming her yellow flashlight at the wheel while Victor Hale gripped a freshly printed allocation order. Beyond them, Claire Whitmore watched from beside an unmarked inspection vehicle, her eyes moving from Ethan's blue security badge to the children's shelter van, waiting in darkness. "Daddy," Lily whispered, "their medicine can't wait." 3 hours earlier, rain had begun striking the corrugated roof of the emergency equipment warehouse with the hard, uneven rhythm of gravel thrown against metal. The storm had moved north, but it had left half the city without power, intersections drowned beneath brown water, and the air inside the building thick with diesel fumes, wet canvas, and the sharp electrical smell of overloaded extension cords. Ethan, 41, moved between shelves in an old reflective jacket, checking fuel caps and service tags with the quiet discipline of a man who trusted machines more than promises. Lily sat in the marked visitor area near the dispatch desk, coloring beneath an emergency lamp because her school had closed and Ethan had no one else to call. She knew not to cross the yellow floor tape. She also knew her father's face changed when a problem was more serious than he wanted her to understand. At 7:52, the warehouse radio crackled. Nora Bell's voice came through beneath a wash of static. Harbor House had 17 children inside. Their backup batteries were failing. One refrigerator held temperature-sensitive medication, and the shelter's heating circulation pump had already stopped twice. Ethan looked toward the equipment board. Only one generator remained available. G17, a heavy diesel unit with a silver maintenance stripe and enough output to carry the shelter through the night. For half a second, the dispatch screen displayed MED 1 beside its serial number. Then the screen flickered. The medical code vanished, replaced by VIP event. Victor arrived moments later in a dry-wool coat, accompanied by a Mercer Relief representative carrying a leather folder. His tone remained calm, almost considerate. He explained that G17 was reserved for a televised fundraising gala at the downtown convention center. If the stage went dark, he said, donors might walk away, and thousands of families could lose future support. Ethan listened without interrupting. Then he asked one question. Does the gala have medication losing temperature? Victor's smile tightened. You manage equipment, Ethan. Finance decides impact. The radio crackled again. This time a child coughed close to Nora's microphone, followed by the soft beep of a dying backup unit. Ethan lifted the handset. How many minutes? Nora answered. 18. Maybe less. He looked at Lily. Her small fingers had stopped moving over the coloring page. She did not plead or cry. She simply picked up her yellow flashlight and stood behind the safety barrier, ready to do the only job her father would allow her to do. Ethan crossed to G17, inspected the hitch, and signed his name in the final responsibility box on the dispatch sheet. Dean Porter stepped forward, but Ethan shook his head. No one else touches it. This is mine. Victor followed him into the yard, still wearing the language of policy like a clean white glove. He mentioned Ethan's health insurance, his rent, Lily's stability. Then he placed the new allocation order against the machine, where the ink smudged beneath his thumb because it had not fully dried. Ethan removed his blue badge before Victor could take it, folded the strap once, and set it on the loading desk. Decorative lights can wait, he said. Children's medicine can't. He released the final wheel lock. The alarm began. G17 rolled across the red line toward Nora's van as Lily's flashlight shook over the wet pavement. Claire raised her phone and photographed the serial plate, the fresh VIP label, and the dispatch monitor behind Victor. No one noticed her pause when the screen refreshed again. Beneath VIP event, visible for less than a second in the cached record, were the faded letters MED1, and a change authorization time stamped 11 minutes before Victor had claimed the generator was ever reassigned. Claire kept her phone angled toward the rain-streaked dispatch monitor as the cached MED1 code disappeared beneath the clean blue letters VIP event. The authorization time remained for only a heartbeat, but it was long enough for her to capture it. 7:49 p.m. Across the yard, the Harbor House van carried G17 through the open gate while its amber lights flashed against the wet pavement. Victor Hale watched it leave without calling security. Instead, he smoothed the damp allocation order against his leather folder and turned toward Ethan with the careful expression of a man preparing to sound reasonable. "Come inside. Leave the equipment key. Your daughter can wait by dispatch." His voice never rose. That made the words feel colder. Ethan glanced toward Lily, who stood behind the yellow safety barrier with both hands wrapped around her flashlight. Water dripped from the edge of his reflective jacket, gathering in small dark circles on the concrete. He walked to her first, crouched, and pulled the hood of her raincoat farther over her hair. "Stay where Ms. Alvarez can see you," he said. "I'll be right through that window." Lily looked past him toward the van disappearing into the storm. "Are the kids getting the generator?" "Yes." "Then I'm okay." Ethan touched 2 fingers gently to her shoulder before following Victor into the glass-walled operations room. The fluorescent lights inside were too bright after the darkness of the yard. They flattened every face, every stain, every tired line beneath the eyes. A regional human resources manager appeared on the wall monitor from a dry office somewhere across the state. Beside her sat a Mercer Relief representative in a tailored charcoal suit, the company's white and gold charity pin fixed precisely to his lapel. Dean Porter stood near the filing cabinets, twisting his wedding ring with one thumb. No one offered Ethan a chair. Victor placed the freshly printed allocation order in the center of the table, then slid Ethan's folded blue badge beside it as though both objects belonged to the same category of evidence. "This is not punitive," the HR manager said. "It is a protective suspension while we assess an unauthorized asset transfer." "A transfer involving a facility with minors," the Mercer representative added. "That creates exposure and reputational risk," Victor said softly. 3 statements. 3 polished voices. Beyond the glass, wind pushed rain beneath the loading bay door, and Lily's yellow light moved slowly across the floor as she followed the water with her eyes. Ethan remained standing with his wet hands open at his sides. "Harbor House had 18 minutes of backup power," he said. Victor lowered his chin with practiced sympathy. "We understand you were emotional. I gave you the time from their battery monitor. You are a technician, Ethan." "Yes. Not an emergency policy officer." The Mercer representative glanced at Ethan's grease-darkened cuffs, then at the leather folder in front of him. He explained that the gala could raise millions for storm recovery, enough to help thousands of people over the coming months. In that version of the story, Ethan was no longer a father who had moved one machine toward 17 cold children. He was an hourly employee who had confused one urgent voice on a radio with the larger good. Victor turned the wall display toward the room. Harbor House appeared at the bottom of the priority list under the classification non-critical residential site. There was no mention of medication, no mention of respiratory conditions.
No me.
Claire watched from the outer corridor, partly hidden by reflections on the glass. She did not know whether Ethan had seen an obsolete screen code, misunderstood a temporary assignment, or acted on incomplete information. But she noticed that Victor never asked to hear Nora Bell's radio call. He only asked whether the recording had been saved. "Who helped move the unit?" the HR manager asked. Dean's fingers stopped moving. Ethan answered before anyone else could. "No one authorized it but me." "The loading team touched the hitch," Victor said. "Under my direction," Ethan replied. "Put my name on it." Dean looked up then, shame moving briefly across his face. Ethan could have divided the blame. He could have named the dispatcher who opened the gate or the driver who secured the straps. Instead, he reached across the table and placed his warehouse master key beside the blue badge. "They followed a safety instruction," he said. "Don't punish them for it." Something in Claire's expression shifted, though not toward belief, toward attention. Victor opened a second document and read the phrases slowly. Impaired judgment under pressure, unauthorized use of emergency property, potential endangerment of minors. Ethan's jaw tightened only once at the last phrase. Through the glass, Lily saw his face and lifted the flashlight slightly, a small wordless signal that she was still there. "Mr. Brooks," the HR manager said, "your employment access and family benefits will be placed under immediate administrative review." Ethan's old phone vibrated in his pocket almost at once. The message on the cracked screen confirmed that Lily's health coverage had been temporarily suspended. He turned the phone face down without showing anyone, then looked at Victor. "Will Harbor House be allowed to keep G17 tonight?" Victor paused. "That decision is no longer yours." "It never needed to be mine," Ethan said. "It needed to be made before the medicine warmed." For the first time, the room went quiet, not because they agreed with him, but because he had refused to defend himself before asking whether the children would remain protected. Victor recovered quickly. He pushed a suspension form across the table and pointed to the signature line. Ethan took the pen, but before signing, his eyes settled on the small gray text in the upper corner. Document created, 7:41 p.m. He looked through the glass at the yard clock above dispatch. G17 had crossed the red line at exactly 8 o'clock. 19 minutes before Ethan had disobeyed an order, someone had already prepared the paperwork to punish him for it. And in the corridor, Claire had just noticed the same impossible time. Ethan did not sign the suspension form. Not yet. His thumb rested beside the impossible timestamp, 7:41 p.m. While rain tapped the operations room glass and Lily's flashlight moved in a slow yellow circle beyond it. Claire saw him notice the time. Victor saw it too, and with a small professional smile, turned the page over as if the number were nothing more than a printing artifact. "You can review the paperwork later. Your access is already suspended. Security will escort you out." Ethan lifted his eyes from the form, then looked through the window toward the loading gate where Harbor House's taillights had vanished into the storm. "Who's connecting the generator?" he asked. Victor closed the leather folder. "That is no longer your concern." Ethan placed the unsigned form beside his blue badge and master key. "Then it should concern someone." 10 minutes later, he and Lily were inside his old pickup, the heater coughing lukewarm air against the fogged windshield. His phone lay face down in the cup holder, but the insurance message seemed to glow through the cracked screen anyway. Lily buckled herself in and held the yellow flashlight across her knees. She did not ask whether he had lost his job. At 9, she knew enough to understand silence, but not enough to carry its full weight. "Are we going home?" she asked. Ethan started the engine. It turned over roughly, then settled into a tired rattle. "We're making one stop." Harbor House stood at the edge of a low neighborhood where storm water covered the curbs and porch lights had gone dark one by one. The shelter's brick walls were wet almost to the windowsills. Inside, the air smelled of damp wool, canned soup, and the faint medicinal sweetness leaking from an overworked refrigerator seal. Nora Bell met Ethan near the basement door with a clipboard pressed against her chest. "They told me not to let you touch company equipment." "I'm not company right now," Ethan said, lifting his personal toolbox. "This is mine." Nora hesitated. Behind her, 17 names were written in blue ink on a legal pad. 2 had inhaler times marked beside them. 1, Noah, age 6, had a medication schedule underlined twice. Ethan read the list once, then crouched beside Lily. "You stay on the dry steps. Keep the light on the gauges when I ask. If Ms. Bell moves, you move with her." Lily nodded solemnly. "No basement floor." "That's right." The generator sat near the service. Entrance, silent beneath a canvas tarp. Water had pooled around one wheel, though the unit itself remained on a raised concrete pad. Ethan pulled back the tarp and ran his hand across the housing. The fresh white and gold Mercer Gala label had begun to peel at one corner. Beneath it, a thin silver stripe showed through. He did not stop to examine it. The fuel connector had split along the collar, likely from cold and age, and the replacement kit that should have accompanied the unit was missing. Nora watched him trace the crack with one grease-darkened finger. "Can you fix it?" Ethan looked toward the parking lot, where his pickup idled beneath the emergency awning. "Yes." He walked outside, opened the hood, and removed a short section of compatible fuel hose from his own truck's auxiliary line. It was not dramatic. No one applauded. It meant the pickup might stall by morning, and it meant Lily could miss school again if the district reopened. Ethan returned with the hose in his palm and fitted it carefully, tightening each clamp by hand before using the wrench. Claire arrived while he was bleeding air from the line. She introduced herself only as someone assessing storm losses for the company's insurers. Ethan barely looked up. "Stand behind the stair rail," he said. "The first start may kick smoke." She obeyed, more surprised by the instruction than offended by it. Victor had described Ethan as impulsive. Everything Claire saw was measured. The way he checked the exhaust path, the way he asked Nora to move the children away from the service hall, the way he made Lily repeat the safety rule before touching the starter. "Gauge at 0, Lily said. "Good. Keep the light steady." Ethan turned the switch. G17 coughed once, twice, then caught with a deep mechanical thrum that traveled through the concrete. Lights returned in stages, not bright, not cinematic, just one hallway bulb, then the kitchen fixture, then the small green indicator on the medication refrigerator. Ethan ignored the children's relieved voices upstairs. He crossed directly to the refrigerator, placed 2 fingers against the compressor housing, and waited until the vibration became steady. Only then did he breathe out. Noah appeared at the top of the stairs wrapped in a thin blanket, shivering despite Nora's hand on his shoulder. Ethan removed his reflective jacket and passed it up without stepping toward the child. "For until the heat catches up," he said. Noah pulled the coat around himself, nearly disappearing inside it. Lily looked at her father's soaked work shirt. "Aren't you cold?" "A little. You can have my scarf." Ethan smiled faintly. "Keep it. You're doing your job." Claire watched him turn back toward the generator instead of toward her, as though her opinion had no value compared with a stable temperature reading. Victor's voice came through Nora's phone moments later, smooth and faintly amused. He said the company would document Ethan's unauthorized interference and warned that personal repairs could void coverage. Ethan did not argue. He asked Nora to photograph every gauge, every clamp, and every temperature reading for the shelter's records. Then he peeled back the loose corner of the gala label to wipe rainwater from the cereal plate. Lily's flashlight caught the silver stripe beneath it, and 4 faded letters appeared through the adhesive. Harb MED. Nora slowly opened her clipboard and pulled out the original fax assigning G17 to Harbor House medical priority. Claire looked from the old lettering to the paper in Nora's hands, and for the first time, Ethan's quiet kindness no longer looked merely compassionate. It looked like the reason someone had failed to hide the truth. Claire did not touch the fax at first. She stood beside the humming generator while the loose gala label trembled in the warm exhaust and the faded letters Harb MED remained visible beneath it. On the page in Nora Bell's hand, G17 was listed as Pediatric Medication Refrigeration, Priority 1. On Claire's phone, the electronic dispatch record said Residential Comfort Support. 2 versions of the same machine. 2 versions of the same need. Ethan wiped his wet fingers on a shop rag and looked at neither woman. "Photograph it before the paper gets damp," he said. Nora tightened her grip on the clipboard. "The company told me this copy may be invalid." "It may be," Claire replied. "I need to verify it." Her tone was measured, almost cold, and Ethan understood why. He had moved company property without authorization, installed a personal part, and now stood beside a document that could conveniently justify everything he had done. Compassion did not make those facts disappear. Neither did the steady green light on the medicine refrigerator. Claire asked Nora when the fax arrived. Nora pointed to the timestamp in the upper corner. 4:16 p.m., before the worst of the storm. She said the shelter had called twice after receiving it to confirm the assignment. Claire asked who answered. Nora could only remember a man from regional dispatch who spoke quickly and told her G17 was already tagged. Ethan crouched beside the generator and held the peeling label away from the metal without removing it. Under the flashlight, the silver stripe continued past the adhesive in a straight line, interrupted only where someone had scraped the surface with a blade. Lily stood on the dry stair watching. That sticker was already coming off when we got here, she said. Daddy didn't tear it. Claire looked at her. Are you sure? Lily nodded once. The corner was wet. It was a child's observation, no more than that, but it removed one easy explanation. Ethan pointed to the fax. What time was the electronic record changed? Claire glanced at him. It was the first question he had asked about his own defense. She opened the internal portal on her phone, entered a temporary audit code, and waited while the weak signal turned the loading symbol in slow circles. Victor called before the page finished loading. Nora answered on speaker at Claire's request. His voice came through smooth and composed. He said the shelter should disregard any outdated paper records, that the fax was likely generated before final allocation, and that Ethan had altered the unit after removing it from controlled storage. The Harbor House assignment was never final, Victor said. Ethan looked at the printed sheet. Then why does it have the final approval mark? There was a pause, not long, but long enough for the generator's low thrum to fill it. Victor recovered. Those marks are system-generated. Claire examined the signature block. The final approval was not a typed stamp. It was a slanted handwritten initial in dark blue ink, pressed hard enough to leave an impression on the page beneath. Who signed this? She asked. Dispatch Administration, Victor replied. Which person? I would need to review the chain. Ethan reached for the yellow flashlight but did not take it from Lily. He asked her to angle the beam across the page instead of directly onto it. The light skimmed the paper, revealing a shallow indentation beneath the signature. 3 letters written on the sheet that had once rested above it. G17. Claire's eyes narrowed. Victor continued speaking, explaining that emergency forms were often stacked and reused during high-volume events. The explanation was plausible. So was the possibility that the fax had been superseded. But when Claire's phone finally loaded the modification history, the room seemed to contract around the small screen. The medical classification had been changed at 7:49 p.m. from a computer inside Victor's office, using the login credentials of an assistant named Melissa Grant. Claire knew Melissa had signed out of the building at 6:32. She did not accuse Victor. She asked only, was Ms. Grant working remotely tonight? Victor answered too quickly. She was not involved in the Harbor House reassignment. Nora looked up. Claire had not mentioned Harbor House when she asked the question, only the login. Ethan noticed it too, but his face did not change. He turned to Nora instead. Make 2 copies of the fax. Keep one off-site. Victor's tone sharpened by a fraction. There is no need to duplicate internal company material. It came to the shelter, Ethan said. It belongs in their records. Claire photographed the signature, the indentation, the peeling label, and the screen history. She still did not know whether Victor had changed the record himself, whether someone had used his office, or whether Ethan had stumbled into a broader administrative failure. But she knew one thing now. Someone had used an absent employee's account to erase a medical priority, and Victor had just denied knowledge no one had accused him of having. Claire quietly sent a preservation request to freeze the dispatch logs and warehouse camera archive. Less than 30 seconds later, her phone vibrated with a security alert. Someone was attempting to access the camera server remotely from Victor Hale's credentials. Claire's security alert was still glowing on her phone when G17 coughed hard enough to shake the service door glass. The hallway lights blinked once, twice, then a third time, and the green indicator on the medication refrigerator vanished. Upstairs, the children's voices fell quiet. Nora looked toward the basement. Ethan was already moving. Keep everyone upstairs. Do not touch the transfer panel. Lily, stay with Ms. Bell. 3 short instructions, delivered without panic. The generator knocked again beneath the low concrete ceiling, each uneven detonation sharper than the last. Diesel fumes thickened in the damp air, mixing with the smell of wet brick and heated insulation. Ethan pulled on his work gloves and crouched beside the housing, while Claire slipped her phone into her coat and followed only as far as the stair rail. Nora's phone began ringing. Victor's name lit the screen. Put it on speaker, Claire said. Nora answered. Victor did not ask whether the children were safe. He said Ethan had likely installed the line incorrectly, that G17 should be shut down immediately, and that continued operation could expose Harbor House to fire and liability. His voice remained calm, almost protective. Let trained personnel handle this. There are no trained personnel here, Nora said. Mr. Brooks is suspended, Victor replied. That does not make him qualified to improvise around children. Ethan did not look up. He reduced the load at the distribution box, leaving only the medication refrigerator, emergency hallway lights, and one circulation pump connected. The engine settled for 3 seconds, then stumbled again. He placed the metal shaft of a screwdriver against the fuel housing and pressed the handle lightly to his ear. Claire watched his face, expecting uncertainty or performance. There was neither, only concentration. Bearing? Nora asked. Ethan shook his head. Combustion. Victor heard him. That is speculation. Ethan removed the fuel drain cap and held an empty glass jar beneath it. Then we test it. A thin stream of diesel ran into the jar, cloudy at first, then clearer. Ethan filled it halfway, replaced the cap, and set the jar on the concrete ledge beneath Lily's yellow flashlight. Within seconds, a transparent layer gathered at the bottom. Water. Above it floated the amber fuel. The basement became so still that the soft clicking of the refrigerator's backup relay could be heard from the next room. Claire slowly lowered the folder she had been holding. Nora stopped breathing through her mouth. Even Victor's voice disappeared for a moment. That fuel can was sealed when it arrived, Ethan said. He did not sound triumphant. The water was already inside. Victor recovered with professional speed. He suggested condensation, improper storage at Harbor House, or contamination during Ethan's unauthorized work. There are several innocent explanations, he said. We should not create allegations before an approved inspection. Agreed, Ethan replied. Call the fire department. That answer caught Victor off guard. There is no need to escalate. Then it is not an escalation, Ethan said. It is an independent test. Nora called the local fire station. Ethan meanwhile rerouted the refrigerator through the cleanest fuel reserve remaining in the line and restarted G17 at reduced capacity. The machine still ran rough, but the green light returned. Upstairs, one child began speaking again. Lily leaned close to Nora and whispered, "The medicine light is back." Nora squeezed her hand. Claire moved toward the jar, but Ethan raised one gloved palm. Do not touch it until someone else seals it. He was protecting the chain of evidence, not himself. When the fire captain arrived, he photographed the jar in place, sealed it, recorded the generator serial number, and took a second sample from an unopened Mercer fuel can. The label carried the same batch code as the supply reserved for the gala. Claire photographed both seals and sent the numbers to a private compliance contact. Victor's tone softened. He asked that the samples be routed through company channels to avoid confusion. We can handle this quietly, he said. Quietly for whom? Ethan asked. Noah Kisashin. No raised voice. Just one question. The fire captain stopped writing. Claire looked toward the phone as though Victor had become visible through it. Then she asked him how he had learned G17 was malfunctioning before Nora called the warehouse. The unit camera alerted us, Victor answered. Ethan turned his head. G17 has no camera. Another silence followed, heavier than the first. Victor corrected himself, saying he meant remote diagnostics, but Ethan knew the model better than anyone in the room. There was no remote connection, no telemetry, no company feed. Claire said nothing publicly. She texted an assistant to preserve all incoming calls between Mercer and Victor, then asked the fire captain to retain custody of both samples outside company control. Victor urged everyone not to let a maintenance issue become a reputational misunderstanding. Ethan returned to the generator and checked the refrigerator temperature before checking the jar. He could have used the moment to embarrass Victor. Instead, he asked Nora to document every reading so Harbor House could prove it had acted responsibly. Lily's shoulders finally lowered when the temperature display returned to the safe range. 20 minutes later, the preliminary field test came back. The unopened Mercer can contained water too. The evidence did not yet prove who knew, who changed the records, or why Ethan's suspension had been prepared in advance. But it proved something important: the failure had not begun with Ethan. And when Claire reviewed the call log Victor thought no one would see, she found that a Mercer employee had contacted him 4 minutes before G17 first began to knock. The Mercer employee's call had lasted 47 seconds. Claire replayed the record twice while G17 throbbed unevenly beneath the shelter, its reduced load keeping the medication refrigerator alive by a margin of only a few degrees. The caller's name was Raymond Sloan, Regional Supply Coordinator for Mercer Relief. For minutes after he spoke to Victor, the generator began to knock. 11 minutes before that, someone using Victor's office computer had erased Harbor House's medical priority. Claire looked from the call log to the sealed fuel sample resting in the fire captain's evidence case. One coincidence could be explained. 3 began to form a pattern. She stepped into the narrow administrative office beside Nora's kitchen and used an access credential Ethan had never seen. The company portal opened beyond the ordinary insurance screens, revealing audit records, vendor warnings, personnel files, and archived camera backups. Ethan noticed the gold corporate seal appear beside Claire's name, but he asked no question. He was kneeling beside Nora's desk, helping her create a handwritten log of refrigerator temperature, generator load, fuel source, and every person who had touched the equipment. "This protects the shelter," he said. "Even if they decide I was wrong." Claire heard him. So did Nora. Neither answered for a moment. Rain ticked against the dark window, and the office printer clicked once before falling silent. Claire opened the message Mercer had sent Victor at 5:18 that afternoon. Water contamination reported in batch 6C. Hold for inspection. Beneath it was Victor's reply: Gala delivery cannot be interrupted. Isolate exposure and prepare deviation documentation. The words were careful. He had not ordered anyone to send contaminated fuel to children. He had not written Ethan's name. But attached to the reply was the suspension template created at 7:41, titled Brooks Deviation File. Claire's hand stopped on the trackpad. Ethan had not been punished after making a reckless choice. A place had been prepared for his guilt before he made any choice at all. She searched the batch number. The first complaint had come from a senior housing complex 3 days earlier. A backup generator there had failed during a short outage, and a maintenance worker named Carl Jennings had been blamed for improper storage. His written appeal claimed the sealed fuel contained water. The appeal had been closed without laboratory testing. A second report came from a rural clinic the next morning. That technician had been placed on probation. After Mercer stated no other customer had reported contamination. 2 workers. 2 facilities with little political influence. 2 internal records carrying the same phrase: operator deviation. Claire leaned back slowly. In the black window beside the monitor, her reflection looked less like an investigator than someone recognizing a room she had once escaped. Years earlier, her younger brother had died during an evacuation delayed by a dispute over which facility qualified for priority power. Since taking control of the company, she had told herself the safeguards were stronger now. The evidence on the screen said otherwise. Ethan's old phone rang. A company attorney introduced himself and offered a private resolution. 6 months of salary, immediate continuation of Lily's benefits, and a neutral employment reference. In return, Ethan would sign a statement confirming G17 had no medical assignment when he moved it and agree not to discuss internal procedures. Lily sat beside Nora at the kitchen table, drawing small squares around the temperature readings. Ethan looked at the insurance suspension message still visible beneath the call notification. Rent was due in 9 days. His truck might not start in the morning. He could hear Noah coughing softly upstairs. "Send it in writing," Ethan said. The attorney's voice warmed. "That is a practical decision. I did not say I would sign." When the document arrived, Ethan read only far enough to find the false sentence about G17. He placed the phone face down. No, Claire turned from the monitor. "You could protect your daughter tonight." Ethan's eyes met hers, calm but tired. "By signing something that helps them do this to the next shelter?" He slid the phone toward Nora instead. "Photograph the offer." Keep it with your records. Claire believed him then, not because he was poor, not because he had a child, and not because he had repaired a machine. She believed the pattern. Every time Ethan was offered a way to save himself, he first asked who else would be left exposed. At the warehouse, Victor's composure began to fracture in smaller ways. He ordered Dean Porter to disable the local camera backup, then changed the instruction to routine maintenance when Dean hesitated. He wiped his phone screen twice with his sleeve. He called Nora Ms. Bellman, though he had used her correct name earlier. Then he requested that Claire leave Harbor House and meet him privately before an incomplete story damaged good people. Claire did not answer. She opened the old gate camera archive before Victor's remote access could erase it. Grainy footage showed Dean removing the MED-1 tag from G17 while Victor stood beside him holding the fresh Gala label. The sound was poor, but one sentence carried through the wind. If this unit fails, Brooks already has a file. Dean's shoulders collapsed when Claire called him. He admitted Victor had warned that the entire warehouse staff could be cut if Mercer's renewal fell through. He had obeyed, then stayed silent when Ethan took responsibility for everyone. Claire asked whether he would repeat that statement on the record. Dean stared through the warehouse glass at Ethan's blue badge lying on the loading desk. Yes, he whispered. By 4:58 a.m., Claire had the contaminated batch warning, 2 earlier scapegoated workers, the pre-written suspension, the altered medical assignment, the camera footage, Dean's testimony, and Ethan's unsigned silence agreement. The truth was no longer a personnel dispute. It was a system that moved risk downward until it landed on people with the least power to resist. Claire closed the laptop as the first gray light entered the window. Victor has called a regional review at the warehouse, she said. Ethan tightened the final entry in Nora's temperature log. Then give them the records. Claire looked at him. They need more than records. Outside, dawn began to silver the flooded streets, and for the first time that night, the evidence was heavy enough that no closed-door settlement could contain it. By 5:36 a.m., the emergency equipment warehouse had become a courtroom without a judge. The loading bay doors were shut against the rain, but cold gray light leaked through their narrow windows and stretched across the concrete floor in long pale bars. Employees from the night shift stood near the shelving racks in damp work jackets. Regional managers occupied folding chairs beside the operations table. 2 company attorneys sat beneath the wall monitor, and the Mercer relief representative arranged a stack of reports with the careful precision of a man expecting procedure to protect him. Ethan entered through the same side door he had used after surrendering his badge. His shirt was wrinkled, his hands still smelled of diesel, and the reflective jacket he had given Noah was folded over one arm after Nora insisted he take it back. Lily remained at Harbor House with Nora, safe and warm. Ethan had returned only for his personal toolbox and the phone charger inside his locker. No one applauded. Several employees looked away. Dean Porter stood near the loading desk where Ethan's blue badge still lay beside the warehouse master key. Victor Hale waited until Ethan reached the center aisle before beginning. This review is not about compassion. It is not about personalities. It is about whether emergency systems can survive individual judgment. His voice was low, controlled, and almost sorrowful. Behind him, the wall monitor displayed a clean timeline in corporate blue. G17 designated for Mercer Gala, Ethan removing the unit without authorization, Harbor House reporting mechanical instability, company exposure increasing by the hour. Victor acknowledged the shelter's needs. He even praised Ethan's concern. Then he reframed that concern as the danger. A good employee, he said, could still make a reckless decision under emotional pressure. A caring father could still create liability around children. The Mercer representative presented projections showing that the gala might have generated more than $2 million in storm donations. The number settled over the room like a weight. For a moment, Victor appeared to regain everything. A few managers nodded. One attorney wrote the phrase disproportionate response across a legal pad. Ethan stood beside his scarred toolbox and listened until Victor finished. Then he asked, "Is Harbor House still listed as non-critical?" Victor glanced toward the screen. "That classification is under review. Put that in the minutes. This meeting concerns your conduct. The children were the reason for my conduct. A chair stopped scraping near the back wall. Rainwater dripped steadily from a torn roof seam into a yellow safety bucket. Victor softened his expression. He said Ethan should not make the situation more painful than necessary, especially with Lily's benefits at risk. Then he offered a new explanation. The 741 suspension file, he said, was merely a contingency template. The MED-1 code had been provisional. The contaminated fuel was a vendor issue unrelated to allocation. Each fact taken alone could be explained. Together, he insisted, they still did not justify Ethan overriding command. It was the strongest version of his defense, and for several seconds it worked. Ethan opened his toolbox. He did not produce a dramatic secret. He removed 4 ordinary objects and set them on the table one at a time. Nora's fax assigning G17 to pediatric medication refrigeration, the sealed copy of the fire captain's fuel report, the cracked hose he had removed from his own truck, and the unsigned settlement agreement. This is not revenge, he said. It is a record of who was asked to carry the risk. Victor immediately focused on the hose. He claimed Ethan had introduced unapproved personal equipment and possibly personal fuel into the generator. The explanation caused a stir because it sounded technical and specific. The Mercer representative leaned back with visible relief. Ethan turned the hose so the cut end faced the room. This carried fuel from the approved can. He placed one finger on the stamped batch number in the fire report. The fuel was Mercer's. The hose was mine. Claire stood behind the glass wall of the adjacent dispatch office, watching Victor commit each statement to the official record. She had not yet identified herself. She wanted the attorneys to confirm that Victor's presentation represented the company's final position. When one of them finally said, "Yes, this is the formal regional finding," Claire sent a file to the wall monitor. The screen went black. Then a single title appeared. Original G17 allocation. Victor's hand moved toward the keyboard, but the system no longer recognized his access. He turned toward the glass. Claire stepped into the room carrying Ethan's blue badge and a slim evidence folder. The Mercer representative stared at the gold corporate seal clipped inside her coat. Dean lowered his eyes. Victor forced a smile. "Ms. Whitmore, I was not informed you would attend." "That was intentional," Claire said. She placed the badge on the table but did not give it to Ethan. First came the fax, then the 741 file time, then the settlement clause requiring Ethan to deny a medical assignment. Victor interrupted only once, claiming the clause was standard legal language. Ethan looked at him and said, "Then why does standard language need me to confirm something untrue?" The room tightened again. Claire touched the remote control, and the wall monitor changed from the allocation file to a frozen frame from the warehouse's old gate camera. In the grainy image, Dean stood beside G17 with the MED-1 tag in his hand. Victor stood behind him holding the fresh gala label. Claire looked across the silent room. "Before this video plays," she said, "everyone should know who authorized its deletion from the main archive." Then she faced Ethan, the blue badge resting between them, and reached for the button that would reveal the sound. Claire pressed play. The old gate camera footage moved in grainy black and white across the warehouse screen. Dean Porter stood beside G17, shoulders bent against the rain, peeling the MED-1 tag from the generator housing. Behind him, Victor held the fresh Mercer Gala label beneath his coat to keep it dry. Wind distorted the first few seconds of audio. Then Victor's voice came through clearly. "If this unit fails, Brooks already has a file." No one moved. The projector fan hummed above the silence, and somewhere near the loading bay, water struck the yellow safety bucket one drop at a time. Victor stared at the frozen image as if distance alone might make it less real. "That recording lacks context," he said. His voice was still controlled, but the final word came out dry. Claire advanced to the next file. The dispatch history showed Harbor House classified as MED-1 at 4:16 p.m., the same time stamped. On Nora Bell's fax, at 7:41, the Brooks deviation file was created. At 7:49, the medical designation was erased from a computer inside Victor's office. At 8 o'clock, Ethan pushed G17 across the red line. The sequence filled the screen in 4 clean rows. No speech could rearrange them. The assistant whose login was used left the building at 6:32, Claire said. Her access card confirms it. Victor looked toward the attorneys. Neither spoke. Claire opened the contaminated fuel warning from Mercer, followed by the earlier complaints from the senior housing complex and the rural clinic. Both workers had been blamed. Neither sample had been tested. Then she displayed Victor's message. Prepare the deviation file before the unit moves. The Mercer representative's pen slipped from his fingers and rolled across the table until it struck Ethan's sealed settlement agreement. This was risk management, Victor said. The gala was expected to fund relief across the region. Expected, Claire replied. She opened one final timestamped notice. The gala had been canceled at 7:28 p.m. because floodwater had closed the convention center access roads. 21 minutes before Harbor House's priority was erased. 32 minutes before Ethan moved the generator. Victor's explanation remained in the room for a moment after its foundation disappeared. Claire placed 2 photographs side by side on the screen. In one, the empty gala stage sat dark beneath unused chandeliers. In the other, taken at 2:13 a.m., the green light on Harbor House's medication refrigerator glowed beside G17's operating gauge. Which one? Claire asked. Was the emergency? No one answered. Dean removed his glasses and pressed them between both hands. The Mercer representative closed his laptop without saving the document on screen. One attorney stopped writing halfway through a sentence. Victor's fingers tightened around the edge of the operations table, then slowly released it. Claire turned toward the room. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am the chief executive officer of this company. A faint shift passed through the employees, but she did not let the title become the evidence. Mr. Brooks is not being cleared because I admire what he did. He is being cleared because the allocation record, camera footage, fuel reports, access logs, timestamps, witness statement, and settlement language established that he restored a medical priority asset to its assigned destination. She faced Victor. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending independent investigation into record alteration, retaliation, concealment of a quality warning, and preparation of a false disciplinary narrative. Your system access is revoked. All Mercer contracts are frozen for audit. Victor swallowed. His eyes moved once toward the camera above the operations desk, then away. There was no outburst, no dramatic confession. Only the quiet collapse of a man who had run out of explanations before he ran out of authority. Claire continued. Dean's testimony would be preserved. The 2 previously blamed workers would have their cases reopened. Harbor House's designation would be corrected publicly to medical priority status, and a clean fuel delivery was already on its way. Then she picked up Ethan's blue badge. The strap hung between her fingers, still folded exactly as he had left it. She crossed the room and placed it in his open hand. Your termination is void. Your wages and Lily's benefits are restored from the moment of suspension. Ethan looked down at the badge but did not put it on. His thumb moved once across the worn plastic edge. His old phone vibrated with a message from Nora. Refrigerator steady. Fuel truck arrived. Children safe. He read it, breathed out slowly, and placed the phone beside the badge. Thank you, he said. Then he looked at Claire. Is Harbor House still at the bottom of the list? The question landed more heavily than any accusation. Claire understood then that returning the badge could repair a record, but not the system that had made the record possible. Not anymore, she said. And not again if I can prevent it. Ethan closed his hand around the badge without wearing it. The room had seen his name restored, Victor removed, and the truth placed where everyone could see it. But as dawn brightened the warehouse windows, one question remained. Now that Ethan had been given back his job and his voice, would he accept them as a reward, or use them to change what had nearly failed those children in the first place? The room emptied without applause. Lawyers gathered sealed folders. Managers signed evidence preservation notices, and 2 security officers escorted Victor Hale from the operations floor without touching him or raising their voices. His access card was deactivated before he reached the outer door. On the wall monitor, Harbor House's classification changed from non-critical residential site to medical priority facility, the new words appearing in the same place where the old lie had stood only minutes earlier. Ethan watched the screen until the update saved. Only then did he look down at the blue badge in his palm. Claire asked the remaining employees to stay. Dawn had turned the loading bay windows pale gold, revealing muddy boot prints, oil streaks, and the red line G17 had crossed in the rain. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "your position, wages, insurance, and seniority are restored. You may return immediately." Ethan rubbed his thumb over the worn edge of the badge. Under the same policy? The room became still again, though this silence held no shock. It held attention. Claire closed the evidence folder. "Tell me what must change." Ethan did not ask for a promotion. He did not ask for Victor's office or a public apology. He pointed toward the dispatch screen. Medical shelters, clinics, and facilities storing essential medication had to outrank promotional events without exception. No single department could alter a priority classification. Every change required 2 independent approvals, and camera archives, vendor warnings, and dispatch logs had to be stored beyond the control of regional finance. He also asked for Nora Bell and a fire service representative to sit on the Emergency Allocation Review Board. "People who live with the consequences should have a voice before the power goes out," he said. Claire listened without interrupting. Then she called the board chair on speaker, read the temporary directive aloud, and signed it electronically while every employee watched the confirmation appear on the monitor. It was not a promise for another day. It became policy before Ethan put the badge back in his pocket. Dean Porter remained near the loading desk after the others began to leave. His face looked older in the morning light. "I should have stopped him," he said. Ethan closed his toolbox. "You should have told the truth sooner." Dean lowered his eyes. "I know." Ethan did not forgive him with a speech, and he did not demand his dismissal. Dean would lose supervisory authority, testify in the investigation, complete ethics training, and work under review. A second chance, Claire made clear, was not freedom from consequences. It was the responsibility to face them. Mercer Relief's contract was suspended, its fuel chain placed under independent audit, and the cases of the 2 workers previously blamed for contaminated supplies were reopened. At Harbor House, a permanent backup generator was approved, along with a clean fuel schedule and quarterly inspections. Nora was no longer treated as a grateful recipient expected to accept whatever remained. Her signature would now appear on the decisions affecting the children in her care. Ethan drove back through streets washed silver by dawn. His pickup coughed twice from the missing auxiliary hose, but it kept moving. When he reached Harbor House, Lily ran to him from the lobby, then stopped before the wet threshold because Nora had taught her not to rush near service equipment. She held up the yellow flashlight. Its beam had faded to a weak amber circle. "Do you need it, Daddy?" Ethan looked past her. The hallway lights were steady. The medicine refrigerator hummed. Warm air moved through the vents, and Noah sat beneath Ethan's reflective jacket while finishing a bowl of oatmeal. "Not right now," Ethan said. Lily clicked the flashlight off. The small sound seemed to settle the whole building. Ethan crouched beside Noah and helped pull the zipper of the oversized jacket beneath the boy's chin. Then he carried his toolbox toward the basement. It no longer looked like the possession of a man people had dismissed as only a pair of working hands. It looked like what it had always been, proof that he knew how to care for things others depended on. Claire arrived a few minutes later, without an assistant or camera crew. She stood beside Nora and watched Ethan inspect G17 before beginning his restored shift. "The company did not save him," she said quietly. Nora looked toward the basement stairs.
No.
He reminded it what it was supposed to save. Ethan heard neither woman. He was listening to the generator, one hand resting on its steel housing, the blue badge tucked inside his jacket rather than displayed across his chest. Outside, the storm clouds broke apart over the city. Inside, no one needed to say what they had understood. Dignity had never required Ethan to raise his voice. Kindness had simply waded through the darkness until the truth was strong enough to become light.